Okay, so hello, happy Tuesday morning. We're on the edge of glory, advancing the circular economy, in fashion and beyond, in Los Angeles and beyond. Welcome to the very first of 5 events of Circular Cities Week 2021, Los Angeles. This one specifically speaking about circular textiles and the pilot project that is being run and managed by LA City Sanitation and California Product Stewardship Council. And a little quick thing about the Circular Economy Club, which many of you I know have joined me in these meetings, and I invite all of you to go to circulareconomyclub.com, find your local chapter, join the LA chapter, join your local chapter, or if there is no local chapter where you are, start it up. And welcome. So this is being recorded because the Circular Economy Club does this really cool, amazing thing where all the global cities who are taking part in events this week, the Circular Economy Club compiles a report of findings of every event, every localized event across the globe that happens during this week. And in February, March, they will release the report, and it takes it like city by city. So there will be a Los Angeles page, and we were in the 2020 report. So this is our second time participating. And basically what they do is they kind of find common themes across all the events, all the cities to define like common circular economy initiatives. And then they also compile what each city is doing. So it's this really comprehensive report that's amazing. And this event will be a part of it. And again, if you're able to turn your cameras on, I encourage that. We all love seeing faces and not talking into the void, but if not, totally understand. And with that, we should kick it off, get into the meat of the reason why we're here. So this is to learn about the Circular Textiles Project by LA Sanitation, which is Mark Sue, who participated with us last year to discuss just the very infancy of the project. And now 1 year later, there's action, there's steps to take. And then also with the California Product Stewardship Council, who's partner with LA Sanitation, I'll let them discuss it. We have Joanne Brash and Ruby Meza, who will be sharing information with us. So without further ado, I'll let either Joanne or Mark, whomever wants to jump off and get us in it.
Thanks. So as Carrie mentioned, my name is Joanne Brash. I am representing the California Product Stewardship Council. I do have a PhD in textile economics, and for 14 years, I taught and researched at UC Davis in the Department of Textiles. And it was glorious. I did a lot of work with the healthcare system. I always joke like I was hazardous before it was cool, but I never really thought actually transitioning from a huge UC to a tiny nonprofit would actually give me a bigger platform. And what was really cool about my work with CPSC is not only did my background and expertise in research and science really come in handy, I'm now working with some of the largest cities and counties throughout the state, which gives me a bigger voice, which is the public voice. And so one of the things that we really love about this project and some of the other ones we're going to talk about are these are some of the only publicly funded textile recovery projects on the West Coast, with the exception, there's a few in Seattle, Washington area. There are some on the East Coast, and there are a ton of industry funded ones, but we're really excited today to share information on these publicly funded projects. So I'm going to hand it over to Mark, and he's going to introduce himself and introduce the LA Sanitation.
Hey, Jan, thank you. So my name is Mark Sue, and I work with the City of Los Angeles LA Sanitation. So, like Carrie mentioned, in the prior past years, we've been trying to develop some type of foundational, whether it's like knowledge or structure, through some funding for specifically textile waste. We've been working the circular economy specifically for textiles, and in the past it's been difficult as we've been drafting our scope of work for our project with shifting of funds, but we finally gotten something put together. I'm happy to say, and we're now working with the California Product Stewardship Council to run a small pilot project in the circular economy space, specifically for textile waste, looking within the city of Los Angeles. The goal of the pilot is obviously to see how much textile scrap and what are the current strategies available to divert as much of that scrap as possible from landfills, and so we can connect key network players within the city of Los Angeles and in the textile industry itself to really manifest and to connect those circular economy that might not be aware of each other in such a small space, but not everyone is aware of what everyone is doing in all the different steps of the textile life cycle. So with that, I'm gonna hand it back to Ann, who will tell you a little bit more about the project.
Yeah, thanks. And then Ruby's going to introduce herself and tell everyone about who CPSC is.
Thanks, Joanne, and thanks to Carrie and the Circular Economy Club for having us here today. My name is Ruby Meza, and I have a background in textiles and apparel design from the University of Texas at Austin, as well as the Paris College of Art. And I'm joining CPSC from companies like Ariat and Skechers, where I primarily focused on apparel design. So with that said, let me introduce our tiny but mighty nonprofit, CPSC. We're staffed by highly skilled, experienced, and passionate people. Our captain at the helm is Doug Cobalt with 30 years of experience at the county level. And our board represents local governments across Southern and Northern California with people that you might be familiar with. Shepard from LA County Public Works. And we have over 13 years of history in waste education and advocacy. And we're able to continue our work because of our funders. Cities, counties, districts, and joint power authorities across the state, as well as sponsors like Cal Recycle, Waste Management, and people like Fibershed, who we've been building our Sustainable Textiles Coalition with, along with companies like Region Apparel, who are a 100-year-old family-owned uniform company based in San Francisco. And we're looking to grow this Sustainable Textiles Coalition, as I said. Joanne, would you like to add anything about our funders?
Yeah, as Ruby mentioned, CPSC, we're a nonprofit, and funding comes from a lot of donations, and that's what gets us a lot of our work at the Capitol. So separate from projects, which we'll talk about in a little bit, CPSC has been in the space of education and advocacy for 13 years, and we've had a couple of really big wins at the Capitol. Specifically on our history has been really specialized in extended producer responsibility and product stewardship legislation. So although we have never legislated or worked on textiles in that policy and actually introduced policies, our past wins have been on things like medicine and needle disposal, which is about to roll out next year. We've worked on carpet and mattresses. I am currently the chair of both carpet and mattress advisory committees appointed by Cal Recycle. So we're in a lot of different spaces in the waste education and advocacy, but our main mission is to engage the industry. Because ultimately, as we add new programs and we add new waste streams, like let's pull this product out, let's pull this product out, adding new programs costs money to local government. And in turn, that gets reflected in your garbage rates. So whether you own your house or you rent, or even in your commercial businesses, there is a monthly fee that's paid for garbage and waste management and recycling. So our mission is to expand and to improve our waste management programs, but in a manner that doesn't increase costs to local government and ratepayers. So that's what a producer responsibility is how can we engage the industry to work together? So like I said, there are other programs here in the state that use that type of philosophy, like mattresses. And so as we move forward with textiles and clothing, as to how can we create a program at the state level? How can we create a program at the city or county level? It's really important that we do these pilots so that we can get the information we need on cost and barriers and challenges and who are the key players and champions in the space already, so that we can build a program that, again, helps these businesses thrive in a way that doesn't cost the public extra money. So textiles and clothing is a really interesting product type because there's already a really large infrastructure for collection and processing. We have thrift stores, we have charities, but ultimately, you know, when it comes to these particular materials, and I'm sure we're all pretty well aware of the problems, it's just not good enough, right? The infrastructure and the programs we have in place aren't doing their job because the thrift stores are burdened with trash and they're drowning in the responsibility to sort post-consumer waste that's ending up, and they have to figure out what's valuable, what's not. Then we have our local government MRFs and waste managers, and they can't take textiles in with hard plastics, right? It gets contaminated and wet, it tangles the machines. So to create a source separated material stream is expensive and it's not easy, especially when you think about a place like the city and county of Los Angeles, which, as we've learned, some of the haulers, we're dealing with thousands of tons a month. So we can't just, you know, let's just start collecting it if there's no end processors and there's no markets in place. The biggest problem is to collect and have no solution. That's how you just end up with a lot of problems. And we can talk about what's happened with carpet and mattresses, where there's collectors who brought in a lot of products, they got paid to do something with them, and then they go out of business. And then the local government and the landlords are then dealing with massive amounts of materials. There was one carpet collector in Southern California who had 3 acres of carpet accumulated when they went bankrupt. So we have learned from other programs what not to do. And so as we look to textiles and clothing and looking at, okay, how is it similar to other waste streams, different? And ultimately the differences are what make it so special. First of all, being clothing is a normal good. Our community needs access to affordable, safe clothing. We need to make sure that secondhand clothing and access to those materials are not impeded by brands, big corporations, or any incentive to destroy materials. At the government level, we use what we call the waste hierarchy to guide our programs and to guide our policies. And the waste hierarchy is, right, prevention first, which I actually like regeneration at the top. Prevention, then you have recycling, and ultimately at the very end is just landfilling, and it's the least desired. So if you can have a program that promotes the waste hierarchy and incentivizes reuse and repair, we're building that resilience and we're building that material economy that we want to be more circular. So that being said, we have a couple pilot projects, not just in the city of Los Angeles, but there's several throughout the state. And CPSC, we're subcontracting to all of these. And the benefit, like I said, our mission is to save government and ratepayers money. So if we can, like Mark said, if our grant got cut, which the city of Los Angeles applied for 100,000 and they got 25. So what do? We combine forces. We find other fundraisers and other opportunities to collaborate so that we can make the most impact with these publicly funded projects. And again, these are some of the only publicly funded projects on the West Coast. When we know about accelerating circularity, we know about a lot of these really cool industry funded, and they have multi-million dollar budgets. Ours are publicly funded, all less than 100,000. So you can imagine the struggles and the challenges we have just on funding, but that's not going to stop us, because ultimately what we want with these pilot projects is a long-term project or a long-term program that's sustainable, that supports the community and doesn't cost too much. So the goals of each of these pilots are a little bit different. First being in San Francisco in 2020, we were hired to go and work with Goodwill and to study what the garments that were not selling on the retail floor, what the composition was. What was interesting, and I'll share the results in a little bit, but what's interesting is most waste characterizations of textiles and clothing only use maybe like 6 categories. It's usually natural, synthetic, accessories, soft goods like not purses, toys, plush items. But we decided with our characterization to take it down to the polymer level, because that's what recyclers need. That's what designers need. You need to know, like, what color is it? How stretchy is it? Is it stained with a large percent, or can you just cut the stain out and use the rest of the material? So ultimately, we were characterizing it wasn't the waste, it was the unsold garments. In order to get into a lot of people's waste stream, you have to build relationships. So it's a really personal, even though it's a business stream and commercial, to get into people's trash is really invasive. So again, working with these companies, we have to show them we're here to save you money. We're help this waste burden to create a system where we can reuse and find value in things, even if they're not wearable as is. So that project in San Francisco did get extended. So we are now in our current phase 2, which is implementing a repair academy at the Goodwill in San Francisco, which is a can of worms. Like, we know volume wise, they're going to have thousands and thousands and thousands of damaged garments if we announce that we're doing this. So it's actually behind the scenes, and we're already just working with the damaged goods they're already getting, which are valuable enough to sell on their e-tailing. So again, really focused scopes, because it's a big can of worms, and anyone who's in this space knows there's just so much textiles out there. So then we'll move on to City of Los Angeles, which is one of the ones we're most excited about. It's been a year in the making, and so this is one where we're actually working with the garment factories. So we're not really dealing with consumer, it's post-industrial textile waste. And part of this project, and we'll go in a little more detail in the next slide, is to basically map out who are the key players in Los Angeles, what's already being done, and where are the gaps that would be key investments for the city or county to expand the circularity of textiles, so that LA can really continue to be a leader in this space, right? Los Angeles is already one of the largest, like, global hubs of manufacturing and style. So why wouldn't we want to lift the region up in sustainability and circularity? So again, it's really mapping about what's already being done, making sure we include people and designers and brands who are already in this space. But for our budget, it's not going to be this huge moving of materials. Again, we know we're dealing with thousands of tons a month. And with this budget, it'd be like 1 truckload. So instead of moving volumes, we're really focusing on case studies, smaller case studies who are breaking the mold. Who's changing the status quo? Who's has a platform or a new method of re-dyeing or whatever it is. So we do have a call for subcontractors, and I'll share that in a little bit. Because ultimately, we don't know what we don't know. We can search Google, we can search whatever's on the internet, but we want to see who floats to the top so that we can make sure that we're really capturing what's happening in Los Angeles. In the county, I did to match the city. So they said, oh, we all felt bad that the grant budget got cut. No one wants a smaller budget. So they matched some of the funds, but instead of studying more garment factories, we're going to replicate the similar methodologies, but study commercial generators. So in our waste world, we call commercial generators are the businesses that are creating the trash. And so commercial generators for textile waste, we've narrowed it down to about 5 categories. We're looking at restaurants, restaurant textile waste, so tablecloths, uniforms, aprons, chefware. We're looking at healthcare, so scrubs, towels, hospitality, linens and textiles, and other kind of small laundries that any of their textile waste that they need help finding markets. So again, our budget's not huge, and we know we can't be moving like truckloads with this tiny budget. So it's more important for us to map out who's in the space, who are already leading, and again, do a few small case studies to show we don't have to shred everything to make a dog bed. You can take this sheet and make it this really, really cool dress. So we're really looking for, again, like innovative designers, innovative textile processors. And then up in Alameda, that's a really small budget, but we're basically just starting a database. Alameda runs a resource database, and it's all about reuse and repair. And all 4 counties, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Contra Costa, share that database. So we're going through and adding, again, like innovative designers and people that are not just your common Google. Like maybe you would Google alteration or tailoring, but maybe your instinct or the residents' instincts are not to research textile artists or local designers and finding it in one central place. So what's interesting about this database, and we're creating a smaller database in Los Angeles, a smaller database in Alameda in the Bay Area with goals to create a statewide one. And what we want from this database is not just, oh, here's a business work on textiles, because we know, especially having designers on our staff, that's not enough. We want to know, what materials do you prefer to work with? What are your products that you put out? Do you have a retail platform, or is it just B2B? So our vision long-term for this kind of hub database is really just material matching with genders of very specific materials and processors who can handle and upcycle and recycle specific materials. And I'll give you one example. Out of San Diego, there's a company that refinishes car seats with really cool fabrics and I don't want to say fake Louis Vuitton, but like it's a very industrial leather kind of, not leather, but car seat material. And as they phase out colors, or if they do a custom project, they have entire bolts, but it's so industrial of a fabric, they need a special processor. So again, when CPSC gets these emails from our waste managers and local government, hey, this person has 8 bolts of this car seat material, our goal would be to go to that database and kind of connect them with different designers or processors who can work with that material. So we all know waste is a problem, especially textile waste, but when it comes to developing a project or developing a pilot, we need evidence. We need authoritative evidence coming from a source that is trusted and ideally public. This is a publicly funded project. We are 100% transparent where our information comes from and what we're doing with it. So we're pulling a lot of our waste data from CalRecycle. They recently finished, every 4 years, they do a waste characterization where they study the different streams. So like the commercial waste stream, single family homes, multifamily homes. And they look for, it's like 30 or 40 different categories. So in 2014, textiles was one category. In 2018, they separated it into 3 categories: organic, synthetic, and accessories. So what we see now is a more detailed kind of scope of how much textiles are actually in our waste stream. So you can see it is the 5th most common material in both single family homes and in commercial franchises. So as our government, who are charged with waste diversion, like there's a law that we have to be diverting from our landfills, they're always looking to those top materials. And when you look at what other materials are regulated, carpet, mattresses, those were easy laws to pass because they're large volume, they're bulky. But as we look to other materials to create programs and policies, we need that evidence. And now we really see from CalRecycle that this is the 5th most common material. So if you are looking to divert and get your diversion goals, textile seems like a really obvious next step. And when you combine all 3 categories into one textiles category, it's actually 3% of the total waste stream in California. And that's huge. And when you read all these other articles citing the EPA and citing other like metrics, just know this is a better metrics to cite. Their methodology is transparent. Their methodology is actually publicly heard and commented on before they do these characterizations. You can get everything from this report. It's on the CalRecycle website. And again, so we know evidence-based, it's a problem. The other thing we really need as we establish programs are what are the costs to manage textiles for the public? So we have information from San Francisco, and as we collect and when we work on this project, we'll be having more information on Los Angeles. So bear with me, I'll go through San Francisco for a little bit because that's the data we already have. So in San Francisco, they tried a couple different collection programs. They put ICO boxes out, they did a collection for chain, the retailers, and they learned, they tried 3 different collection pilots for post-consumer clothes, and they learned the same thing across all 3 projects is collection's not the problem, that they're going to collect more than they can possibly manage. All 3 pilots had to get cut because it was too much volume and it was too expensive to sort because the value of the textiles and the garments just weren't there. So they were getting the trash. They were getting the unwanted, unusable textiles. So they had to discontinue all those pilot projects. So then they did basically, let's put your clothing in a bag and put it in your recycling bin. And they did, that ended horribly. Every single bag pretty much went to the landfill. It got contaminated and wet, it tangled. It was hard to train staff to pull those bags off the MRF line. So they quietly moved the textiles to appointment-based pickup. And the problem is they moved it quietly because they didn't want to make a big deal out of it. And so a lot of the residents still think you can put bags of textiles in your recycling bin. And to this day, they're still pulling bags of textiles as contaminants out of the MRF lines. So they did appointment-based pickup. So you would, if you have textiles, you would put them on you'd make an appointment, you'd put it out with your e-waste, your other bulky items, and the charity would drive behind the city dump truck, and the city would take whatever was non-textiles and the charity would take the textiles. The problem with this is that charity needs to have a market and they're going to get trash. And right now we know thrifts don't have a market for trash textiles. The other thing that happened is when you actually calculate the staff time to arrange the pickups and the time that the city truck to this appointment, even if it's just textiles and back, was an estimated $61 per pickup in a bag of socks. So why would the public have to pay $61 to get rid of their trash if there's really no system for it? So ultimately, they have quietly discontinued that program as well. And they're working with CPSC to get a new local ordinance working that actually engages the producers and has some co-funded solutions. And so I talked earlier about San Francisco and our initial characterization. So I won't spend too much time on this, but I wanted to share, because I know there's a lot of people and a lot of designers on this call who are interested in post-consumer textiles and even like what's in the waste stream, or sorry, what's in the material stream. We're really trying to avoid using the word waste because we know it's not waste until it enters a waste program. Before it enters a waste program, it's just a material, and we treat it like a commodity then. So in 2 days at a Goodwill in San Francisco, we found that it costs about 65 cents per garment to have a minimum wage staff hold up the garment, analyze it, look at the brand, look at the polymers, judge the quality, and that's about 65 cents. So obviously we can save money if we automate this, but the goal is to get jobs and to have that quality assurance. The level of technology is just not there. Technology can identify certain polymers, certain percentages of polymers, but ultimately it's a human skill to actually judge a garment on its quality. Some of the other interesting things we found: 44 unique polymer types and 275 blends of polymers. I know a lot of designers are probably not thinking, oh, that's an interesting thing, but in the waste world, when a recycler can only take certain percentage of nylon, but we're dealing with 275 different blends in 2 days, you can imagine someone who's putting $30+ million into a machine isn't going to risk a contaminated garment into their multi-million-dollar machine. So post-consumer textiles is just not the best source for recycling. So when we develop these programs, we're trying to find how can we upcycle them? How can we repurpose them and keep them out of the recycling system? Because the recycling technology just isn't there. So with that, I'm going to open it to questions while I pull up a couple other documents specific to the LA projects. Are there any questions? Or I see there are a few chats. Does someone want to read them to me? Ruby, you want to field the chat and the questions?
Sure. Okay, so I got them.
I had a really quick question.
Yeah.
On your previous slide, in your data, you said 90% was sellable and 50% was recyclable. So some are both recyclable and sellable. Is that how that adds up?
Yeah. So let me pull that back up. That's a really good. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. So they're two separate exclusive metrics. So the first one, when we said sellable, this was a subject qualitative metric. So as the people characterizing it, one of the questions was, is it sellable as is without modifications? Meaning it didn't need washed, it didn't need stain removal. So 90% of the clothes that didn't sell at the Goodwill were like no modifications needed. They were just, I don't want to say perfect, but they were just as is. Separately, we use an 85% of a primary fiber as our metric for recyclability. We know that most recyclers can only take 95% or less, higher. So they can take a 5% contamination, meaning they need near 100% polyester or near 100% nylon. The reason we chose 85% is because Aquafil, one of the largest nylon recyclers in the world, who actually has a plant up here in NorCal, they can take a 15% contamination. So we chose 85% or higher as one primary fiber would make it recyclable. But that's in theory, right? That doesn't include buttons, labels, chemical coatings, things like that. Great question. Are there any other questions?
Should we put it in the chat?
Oh, no, you can ask verbally too.
What about some of the more like hardware components that are being put in clothing? Like if there's inserts or things like that that need to be mechanically removed.
Yeah. So this particular study in San Francisco, we were studying garments before they were baled and sold as is. So they were not recycling bound. So we noted it was kind of just yes or no. Were there zippers and buttons and hardware? It was just yes or no. So we have that data. It's not on this particular slide, but I'm happy to share that. I will say the technology out there to remove the hardware, and we call them all contaminants, like barriers to recyclability. So in the waste world, buttons, labels, dye, chemical coating, it all depends. How big of a barrier depends on the process that they're using. So if it's a mechanical process, you can just remove them and they're usually fine. If it's a chemical process, you have to remove every single contaminant. So it really depends on what type of recycling we're dealing with. But we prefer no, as little chemical recycling as possible. We just don't think the evidence is there that it's as safe and energy efficient as some of the more mechanical options that are out there.
Thank you.
Of course.
One more question. Is there a way to bridge the gap of this wonderful information to get to product designers and to get into curriculum? Is there a way to filter this so that it can be a lessons learned and situation?
Yeah, so I haven't published this data set in like an article yet. I'm always looking for someone to help me write things, but I did just write a book chapter that was looking at just the policy tool. So the book chapter is a little more policy oriented, but it uses this evidence to support some of the claims I make. And that's a Fairchild book. It's coming out in January. It's called Sustainable Fashion: Take Action. It's the 3rd edition by Janet Hathorn and Connie Ulatzowitz. I'm chapter 7. So that's one, and I know that's used in curriculums. That book, that 3rd edition, is in a couple different universities. But again, we're in the waste world. Like, this is why we do these kind of webinars, because we want to connect with the designers. I was really excited to hire Ruby specifically for these projects because we need designers in part of these teams. And one thing I noticed in our first month working together is Ruby and I didn't have the same set of vocabulary. As a designer, she uses different words, and I'm like, hey, but in the waste world and for government, we have to call them generators. We have to call them polymers and materials. So I think not only does the curriculum on the data need to be happening, but we all need to find like common language to get certainty. And I'm also willing to share this language. I have a public version of the actual data, and I've shared it with the industry, and I'm more than happy to share it with anyone. Again, we're publicly funded, and it's our pleasure to share the information.
Please share all of the information.
Same here. I'd love to see all that information too.
Wonderful. What other questions do we have? Oh, thank you, Ruby, for sharing the waste character report. And it's interesting because they do it every 4 years. So you can go into the history and see how textiles has grown, and also how CalRecycle, as the leading state agency, has put more emphasis on textiles. Great, thank you.
Do you see any more oh, I'm sorry, are we done?
No.
Do you see any more regulation? Like if there's, we don't do something about it, then someone else will that's more governing?
Yeah, absolutely. And if California tends to lead the nation, I'd say with extended producer responsibility, Maine one with packaging, and Oregon one with a couple other bills. So I think legislators are eager for textiles. at the local and the state level. I will put a disclaimer, I am not advocating for any policies on this call. I'm only educating. I am not, but I do lobby in this other part of my job. And so we've been shoulder tapped by several legislators who, you know, there are certain aspects of textiles that are more intriguing than others, whether it's microfibers or PFAS, but waste as a whole, like as a big picture, there are absolutely some recommendations coming in the pipeline. Great, so now I just need to, I accidentally shared just the power, so I just need to share my screen. Here we go. So here's just a little handout, and I've already uploaded these to the registration. So if you didn't get them, just let me know. I can make sure you get it. And it's basically a handout so you can see exactly what's happening with this project, who our partners are. We're very transparent on our objective. So again, building the database, picking a few case studies, developing some best management practices. So we know we're not going to physically open a hub, but we can make recommendations where in the city it should be. What should that physical location, what should be the features included? And then again, with the county, we have similar methods, but we're studying other types of textiles. So the city is mostly garment factories, and the county, we're looking at hotels, hospitals, laundries. So here's our call for sewing professionals. And again, I'm happy to send these. I know Carrie has it, so I'm sure she can share too. And basically across our 4 projects, not all of them are funded contracting. But ultimately, as we're building our database, we want people to be part of it because we're getting contacted by other government agencies. We're getting contacted by, you know, generators and designers. So we want to be able to put them together in this database, whether or not it's fully funded and developed or not. So if you are interested, whether you're a designer or even if you are interested in just collecting and sorting, any step of the process that you're interested in getting involved in, if you fill out this form, we'll basically contact you, let you know what category you fall under, and if you qualify for a funded subcontract, you'll basically take in materials from our diversion, design them, do whatever we agree upon, whether it's repair, upcycle, whatever it is. And then most likely we'll either have you resell it or donate them because again, we're a public agency, we're not retailers. So we're open to all types of designers. We will basically select the top 5 to 8, present them to the city as this is who we think are breaking the status quo and really breaking the mold. And then we'll go into subcontract with them. Again, we know we can't move volumes. We know there are thousands of tons of textiles out there every month. So if we can find what companies, maybe by getting a feature, it'll help their business grow, or it'll help highlight what's already available. And you can, we also have it in Spanish. So if anyone prefers the Spanish version, it's open.
A question for you. It's actually clarification. So on the screen right here in that little purple part, it says at least 2 million in general liability insurance. But when I clicked on your link to the form, in that it says $1 million general liability insurance. So what's the minimum, 1 million or 2 million?
Yeah, no, that's actually been like a really big coin toss. So our contracts say 2 million for our subcontractors. When we went back and we've noticed there are some exemptions, and they said we could accept 1 million for special requests. So we lowered it to 1 million. And I know there's a disconnect because these documents already went out, but with the submission form, we were able to change it.
Okay.
I'll say it's flexible. Like we're on paper held to 2 million. 1 million would be a special exemption. But even then, and part of our report, these are the hidden barriers, especially women-owned business, minority-owned businesses. having 2 million coverage, we know is a big challenge. So we're willing to lower it to 1 million with written exemptions, and also acknowledging that it's that itself is going to be a challenge. So it's 1 million.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Joanne, we had a question earlier about a law that you mentioned that regulates textile waste. Asking for clarification on that law.
So there's no law in California specific to textiles. There are some general waste diversion laws, and I don't have all the numbers off the top of my head, but local government, we're trying to get to 75% diversion by, to be honest, I think it was 2020 and we failed. So we're still held to that 75% diversion. There are hauling laws like AB 908, I think is the number, where only licensed waste haulers can haul waste. There are laws that just passed recently on banning PFAS from children's wear and children's textiles, but there is no textiles law or program. Everything is just voluntary or charity based. When you look at the whole country, New York has a law where it's basically a city run collection kiosks that partner with charities, which is great. But again, it's not solving the problem of the trash. But then you look at France, UK, and parts of Canada, they have EPR laws which is extended producer responsibility for textiles. So we see other countries kind of leading the way, and Europe tends to go first. Canada does have a lot more of those types of programs. But here in the United States, passing EPR is a little bit of more of a challenge with corporate lobbyists at hand. So I would say some of the things that are in the works and in the pipeline, yeah, there's EPR and kind of the big picture, but there's a lot more low-hanging fruit where we can help support and incentivize upcycling and repair. And yeah, Ruby sent a good link. And on that link to our stewardship page, you can see some of the press that we've been featured in, where we kind of make our position statements. I was part of the Fashion Revolution Solidarity with Secondhand Clothing panel. Things got a little spicy. It was good. It's good to have these tough conversations because at the end of the day, it's a problem. And if we don't talk about the problems, we can't find a solution. Are there any? Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
So you're a nonprofit governing, sort of supporting the stewardship of products. So does that put you in a position to be able to, say, certify a company for the product or for their operations, give them some sort of recognition for complying or for being innovative?
So we're not a certifying organization. There are some out there. I would always warn you, if someone's offering a certification, look at what type of nonprofit are they. There are technically 12 different types of nonprofits. We're a 501c3. That means public benefit, no memberships. Most trade associations and certifications are 501c6 or 501c4s. Those are not public benefit. They do tend to have a little bit of a red flag for me, but there's reasons why I have those different layers of transparency.
Right.
We do an annual award. So we've had 13 years of our Arrow Awards. We just fun though. We give them cool plaques. We take people out to dinner and we do a big party, but it's not notification, but it's kind of an endorsement from CPSC. Cal Recycle, I will say, for the established programs, whether it's carpet, mattresses, those do have authorized lists, and they have their own grant systems. They have their own funding for processors.
Got it. Yeah, that's really valuable because we're a 501c3 and interested also in we're incubating startups. We're very interested in being able to support the certification, so to speak, and how to go about that. What does it look like for the industry? We would love to be able to say this company's operations, have a standard at a certain level, and if you can set those requirements and then give some sort of certification or acknowledgement, it would be very helpful for their business practice.
I would recommend, I think, some of the most common certifications. Textile Exchange does quite a few. They're pretty transparent and they're good. I know AATCC, the Textile Chemists Association, they do certifications on very specific things. I know there are other agencies in this, not agencies, but groups like, I know the group that does the Higgs Index, there's one group that does, but I would put a grain of salt with all of those because they have their own mission that they're solving, and unless they're publicly transparent, they don't always share their scope, right? If you're doing an life cycle assessment, what your scope is going to determine your outcome.
Right.
So I would say, I think some of the discussion at the federal level has been on how does government agencies support third-party certifications, knowing that who's certifying the certifiers.
Yeah.
So I would say that conversation's probably happening more at the federal level. Oftentimes states and local governments are not the ones managing those databases.
Right. Makes sense.
Is the certification required to join your case studies?
No, not at all. Not at all. Let me put my PowerPoint back up. We can always jump back to questions, and I'm going to go through these next ones a little bit fast because I know it seems like there's a little bit of interest in policy. So these are separate from our projects, but CPSC, we host a statewide textile recovery advisory. We have a report coming out directly to the legislature on what we think are our top priorities. And you can see we have nonprofits, we have manufacturers, but we're being very, very selective if we let any brands on, because again, we don't want it to come across as an endorsement. I don't know who your labor rights, like unless I know you have no children labor, you're paying everyone fairly, I'm not paid enough to endorse any brand. So we're being very selective. And again, we would love to endorse someone through a subcontract and a case study. So with our statewide advisory committee, we basically wanted that kind of public-private representation. And some of our policy ideas that we're really pushing are basically, how can we help repair and upcyclers? That's more important to us than, say, a waste action program, which we know is going to be expensive. And we know composting is up and running and costing everyone a lot of money. So maybe Textiles can wait a year or two if we do something like tax incentives for repair. So if you're doing upcycling or repair, if you had an immediate tax deduction, that would give you a huge financial incentive and keep these businesses alive who are really challenged right now in these times. We're working with the local level to get either cities or counties to establish green purchasing programs. They already do. A lot of these cities and counties already have environmental purchasing programs, but they don't have textiles specifically. So we are adding uniforms to these environmental purchasing programs. We're adding that they need to require repair before they recycle it. We are suggesting if a city or county wants to work with a charity, that they mandate reporting. Well, how much is still going to the trash? How much is getting shipped abroad? Because right now, the thrift stores are kind of a big black hole of data and information. And then state level, like I said, tax incentives, EPR, more PFAS and microplastics, because we know it's a problem we have to stop at the source, because cleanup and mitigation of those contaminants will be extremely expensive. We must slow down the tap for those types of products. And then education and outreach, we feel like Cal Recycle, they've been a little quiet on textiles and clothing, and I know they're waiting to get the data and to get the information, but from what we've heard from everyone we've interviewed is now's the time. They have to speak up on how to prioritize repair, upcycling, and how to really incentivize a circular economy that doesn't rely on recycling. And then we have a few requests for federal updates. It's a little beyond my reach, I'll be honest. Even though I've been presenting to federal agencies, I'm just educating. So I don't have any pull. If anyone on this meeting has pull at the federal level, it's definitely something we've been advocating for quite some time. So those are all the slides we have. I definitely want to open it to the floor and just know, is there something you think is definitely worthwhile for us to call out in our report, in our pilot projects? It's happening in LA.
We're recycling a bunch of our face shield plastic material back into 3D printer filament.
Oh, cool.
And also using it as an educational opportunity and a workforce development opportunity through the LA County Youth at Work program.
So you pelletize and thermoform on site?
Not yet, that's the goal. But because we're kind of closed to the public right now, what we're doing is offsite work. So the city of La Puente has given us a site to actually prepare the material and sort it so that it can be more easily recycled at a facility. So we already have the facility that is a partner of ours that we're working with, and they're set up to make the filament. We found that the issue was in the prep, in the identification of the materials, in the sorting, in the breakdown, so that it could go into the pelletizer. So we've actually enabled a workflow, like a supply chain, that's creating jobs just in that niche of getting the material, breaking it down, labeling, and preparing it so that it can go, so it doesn't get turned to a landfill. So we found that that's a really good niche for us. Also, the design contests and getting the information from you and other groups about how to properly prepare that material and any other material that we come in contact with. We'd love to have that as a continual build out, so that we can at least play one role in that supply chain to make sure that things are getting sourced in the right direction.
Awesome. What else? What other cool things are people working on?
Just real quick, what Nick there is from Lacey, and behind him, I believe, is your Advanced Prototyping Center. And all of you can get more information on that for their event tomorrow, and then an in-person campus visit on Friday. So cool stuff with Lacey coming up this week. But I had a separate question. With fast fashion and the value of fast fashion labels, so often there's nothing wrong with that top, but it's an Old Navy top, it's a Merona top, it's a Forever 21 top. And there's really not, the resale value of a good quality Old Navy top, unfortunately, isn't really worth the efforts of cleaning that and photographing that and repairing it and putting it back up on the site. Which is a big challenge, because that section of brands is what's clogging the Goodwills and the thrift stores. And if any of you try to go sell your clothes at Buffalo Change or Crossroads, they don't even, if it has that label, no dice. So that resale problem with a low value fast fashion brand is something like we're trying to upcycle or add more value. So I know you had a repair over upcycle over recycling, but if that repair, if the branding garment itself isn't worth the repair, but could be worth the upcycling, like, do you have like limitations against that, or is it kind of like go for it type of thing,
Oh, there's no limitations. And I will tell you, in practice, a lot of those programs just do whatever's easier. Like a lot of carpet and the mattresses stuff are going to the landfills because they don't want to pay the extra shipping. And if it was an actual like law and program, yeah, there might be, you know, consequences and oversight. But right now for a pilot, no, we don't want to add limitations because we want to see what's possible. And if that's an issue, like that's the challenge, is the brand identification is low, the value of the material itself. That's something that we need to include in our report, because that's something, it's almost like unbranding is something that needs to be identified. So I would say in the waste hierarchy, it's in theory, and in practice, it's not really enforced at the individual levels. I will say some of the legislated programs, they do have like what percentage of the materials have to be renovated, what percentage has to go into resale. But for a pilot, it's just, you know, okay, what are we just identifying what's the best management practices and what is needed to push them up the waste hierarchy. So if right now the best thing is upcycling, and the only way to push it up the waste hierarchy is to remove that fast fashion brand, then I think that's something that needs to be addressed. I mean, fast fashion in general just needs to be addressed, but I don't think it's going to be one policy that really solves it. I think it's more or less incentivizing companies like you who are doing the upvaluing more so than regulating the ones. It's just the reality of what it's like to pass laws in the United States. I know we're a few minutes over. I'm willing to stay if anyone else has questions. There's also my email up here on the screen. We have a listserv. If anyone wants to be added to the listserv, that's where we send all of our immediate announcements for any of the projects or any of the policy reports that we have coming out. And again, if anyone is interested in being added to the database and being considered for a subcontract, please go to the link that Ruby put in the chat. We're taking submissions for the next month, but it's on a first come, first serve until as long as funds are available. So I encourage everyone to submit sooner. Your next steps will contact you, confirm, you know, which category you've been eligible for, and what the next steps are. So if anyone else has questions, again, I'm willing to stay on a little bit longer. So thank you everyone so much.
One really quick thing. Sorry, Joanne, I'm outside doing the remote life with another family member who's on a call at my house. But I wanted to know, and Carrie knows about this, but I work at Lacey, and I work with CSUN, and they're actually doing a sustainability fashion program right now. And so I don't know if you have any interest in partnering with maybe some students in that program to like support some of the work that you're doing, but there may be an opportunity there. So if you'd like to be connected with Dr. Zappia there, or a woman named Tracy Chung, I'd be happy to make that introduction. And yeah. We do have a focus on circular economy, and I'm actually doing some research on some policies related to fashion and waste diversion. And so one policy that was interesting that comes from the EPA level is the want to make sure we're removing textile fibers out of some of our waterways and systems and regulating industry there. So I think there may be some opportunities next year after we get past some of this curve of energy investments as well as EV charging infrastructure investments, and we might start thinking about, you know, some of the long-term manifesting needs of like, we are going to have to create a way to reuse some of these batteries, and thinking about how that translates into other things that we utilize on a daily basis. So yeah,
that's really interesting. So there's 2 active microfiber bills, and that will carry over to next session. Mm-hmm. There's some really interesting research going out right now with laundry effluents, because they're not really letting people in to study it. So they're studying the snow outside the dryer vents, public waste. It's so cool. I love sneaky methodologies. But then you spoke about battery. So we're actually the lead sponsor for a battery extended producer responsibility law. We would love you to on and support. And basically, we know that batteries are a major problem. Not only do they cause fires in our MRFs, our MRFs are now no longer reporting them because insurance has gone up so much because of battery fires, that they do everything they can to avoid a fire report. And so it's become this really big environmental justice issue with battery fires. And then you mentioned about regulating, the waste stream and kind of what's going out of the effluents and the wastewaters. So the two PFAS bills that passed is a trio of organizations: Environmental Working Group, Breast Cancer Prevention. Those trios, I call them the toxics, the group. They are fully committed to doing more bills on PFAS and more bills specifically on textiles. Children's tend to be the easiest precedent to set. So if you have a body of evidence that shows some toxic or a human impact, it's easiest to pass a law on children's wear. Then you have your precedent. Then you can go to adult wear, because toxicity matters obviously on body weight and exposure. I'd say some of the things that we are really adamant on not passing would be things like a landfill. Like CPSC will probably do everything we can to squash things like that. So what we have found is policy tools like that tend to cost government a lot of money, oversight, and then there's no solution for these materials. For example, there was a city in Canada that did a ban, and what happened was huge amounts of illegal dumping, unauthorized collection. All of a sudden kiosks were popping up with no one responsibility. And you had thrift stores like Salvation Army who had to invest $500,000 in 6 months to keep up with the question from a bad policy. So we've been working with policymakers at the state and local level, because ultimately, again, we need long-term solutions that are co-funded. We have a lot of opinions on SB 1383, which is a mandate to compost that had zero financial support. And so what we see is a lot of local governments struggling to meet that compliance. But we see a lot of investments from the governor into composting. So I think, again, when there's bad policies, there tends to be unintended consequences. And so what's nice about taking textiles and clothing kind of slowly and gathering California-centric data is that we have a program that has the industry helping out. But yeah, if you want to talk batteries, solar panels, marine flares.
There's so many things, but I also know that like a lot of policy, a lot of the time it's like somebody only understands one piece of a very large issue. And so like that's really where you want to create a policy because you want to fix the problem that could impact your niece or your child or something like that, but you don't understand how the end users or what players are affected by it. And so in order to be in regulation, you might do some things that you shouldn't be doing because you don't have support or resources. So it's really about like building capacity in order to meet that. And so one really cool technology I saw the other day was it's like a QR code so you can like trace the life cycle. But I was like, oh, it'd be really nice if there was a law that was like everyone has to do some sort of tracing so that you always know what material you're getting if it does arrive at a textile waste facility or a recycling facility. You don't have to like be doing all these guesstimates of if it's cotton or if it's certain things. So
and what I can do is I can send you, I did 2 presentations in the last few weeks, one at the federal level and then one at the state level, where we were talking exactly about that. But it gets really complicated because labels are actually federally preempted. So you cannot actually regulate on a garment label at the state or local level. So a lot of that QR code information is being at the federal level, which federal laws on labeling haven't been updated since like the 70s. And B, there is zero enforcement. I don't want to say zero, very low enforcement on labels. We found that at the Goodwill study. The labels are not accurate and they don't identify anything less than 10%. They don't have to. So if you mix in a little 5% nylon for a little bit of stretch, you don't legally have to disclose that. And that would ruin a recycler's machine.
Well,
So at the federal,
I'm specifically talking about it's a volunteer effort. So I mean, it's a company called Fiber Trace, which you've probably heard of. And so just thinking about something like that long term, or getting more adoption in the fashion industry on that, I think would be something helpful. I don't think we're just quite there at the regulation, but we should probably update, you know, the same way we need to know what's in the nutrition of our food, we probably should know what's really in the clothes that we wear. So. And
I would say that group, in addition to EON, they've been doing a lot of lobbying at the federal level. So I would really hope that it gets updated soon. Yeah. Like, I think the QR code is such a good idea. The problem is mandates. Like, if you mandate a change state level, though, what with a lot of ways to circumvent these federal preemptions are through disclosures. So you can mandate a disclosure of a certain ingredient or a certain material, but you can't mandate and regulate on the label itself. So some of the disclosure laws have said either you have to add a sticker or add a disclaimer on the product or on the website. So it's been pretty interesting to see like where people can kind of work around based on the challenges of passing certain laws. But I absolutely agree. Labeling needs to be updated, enforcement. And I know it's actually enforced by customs. So I know they're just overwhelmed right now. So it's a hard ask, but I would say it is being lobbied for.
Well, I'd love to be added to your newsletter, and I will work to connect with LinkedIn, but I have to jump. Great seeing all of you. Also being able to see Ginny and Nick here, as well as seeing Carrie again. So, but it was great being here. It was a very informative conversation. I didn't know about all these projects, so thank you.
Of course. Yeah, thanks. Are there any other questions? This is fun. This is fun for us.
I don't have a question, but I'm super thankful for your presentation and excited to connect.
Yeah, of course. You can email us and we'll just add you to the listserv. Or you can put your email in the chat. Ruby can copy and paste them.
One of the articles that I often share with product designers is from the five years, I don't know how to say it right, 5G.
The five gyres.
5 gyres. In material substitution. So if you're looking to design, what are your options? And a lot of that resource information isn't available mainstream. Would definitely love some resources there. If anything that we could actually send to some of our product designers would be great as well.
Yeah, 5 gyres is good. Fiber Shed, I know they do a lot of mapping of local and regional natural fiber systems. I mean, I think that's just kind of one of those things that's a little controversial right now, because like certain studies out there are saying, okay, well, synthetics are, lower GHG and better for reuse, but then the natural fibers are better for the ecosystem, durable. So I think the research is still kind of battling it out right now as to what are the most preferred fibers. But Textile Exchange does their preferred materials report, and they really focus on that stuff. I think they're another really good resource. I want to say their preferred materials report came out just in September, so it's pretty recent.
What was the second one you named after 5 gyres?
Fiber Shed, I think.
Fiber Shed. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And they have a SoCal and a NorCal one. So, and their whole is 100% natural with the ecosystem. So, they've got some interesting work out there.
Any final questions? Now's your chance. Anyone? Okay. Well, like I said at the beginning, this is the first of 5 events this week for Circular Cities Week. So a little plug for what's coming up next. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock is a virtual tour and information session at Lacey. So that's online. And then you can switch it up to an in-person. What? An in-person event? What? You can go visit the Lacey campus downtown in the Arts Center on Friday. It's very limited. So if you haven't signed up, please sign up for that. Otherwise, you can join their virtual event tomorrow at 11 a.m. And then tomorrow at 5 p.m., very interesting conversation with Fibra and Loop on the post-consumer textile or post-consumer clothing challenge. So a continuation of this conversation from the small business viewpoint. And then Thursday evening at 6, very important topic here in Los Angeles, food composting and community composting, something that is not accessible to most of us. But Compostable LA and Long Beach Fresh will be co-hosting Thursday night at 6 p.m. to talk about community composting in Los Angeles County. And then Friday, in-person human-to-human visit to see this amazing center down at Lacey. So wherever you, in Eventbrite, when you signed up for this, if you just look down further in that event, you'll see the links to all the other events. So that's how you can find everything. And on behalf of the Circular Economy Club, Los Angeles, thank you. Thank you, Joanne and Ruby and Mark, for continuing this story from last year when we talked about it in its infancy. So any final words from anyone? And
Thank you, everyone. We're really excited to connect and looking forward to connecting more in the future.
Yeah, that was an epic presentation. Thank you. So much knowledge shared.
Thank you.
okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a fabulous Tuesday. We hope to see you tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. All right, very good. This will be on YouTube, so I'll send everyone a link to that. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Carrie.
Bye.
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 All right.